Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Where Work Meets Life. I'm Dr. Laura, and I'm delighted to be here today with Pamela Barnum, a former undercover police officer and federal prosecutor, as well as a keynote speaker like myself. And we're going to be talking today about building trust in today's organizations, lessons from a former undercover police officer. So I had the great joy of meeting Pamela through the Canadian Association for Professional Speakers that we're both a part of. And I was just so intrigued to hear her speak at our annual convention a couple of years ago. So imagine what it would be like to live undercover with a different name and identity, putting yourself in harm's way and having to use every ounce of your skills and abilities to make a difference when it comes to drug busts. So she worked in the drug enforcement section. She learned real world techniques for how you build trust with drug dealers and very difficult people. And then Pamela graduated from law school when she left policing and became a federal prosecuting attorney, which is another role that requires really important skills to detect and to build trust with others. So she became a body language expert as well. And then following her 20-year career in the criminal justice system, she ended up going out on her own and working with organizations and negotiating. She studied corporate negotiations, and I'll let her explain a little bit more about her career trajectory. But now she's a speaker, and she speaks all over the place about these important topics. Welcome to the show, Pamela.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you, Dr. Laura, and your podcast reaches so many people that are in that space just looking for those tips. So I'm very grateful you invited me to be here with you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So tell me about how, fill in some of the gaps that I just gave in your intro about how you went from an undercover officer to a keynote speaker.
Yeah, I had a little chunk in between there. I was undercover for about a decade, and then I met someone working undercover, not a drug dealer. He was actually another undercover officer, and we were supposed to pretend to be married. Well, we went out and bought cocaine and all the things. And then as time passes on this project, we're living together. We call it our government prearranged marriage. We end up actually getting together, and we decided to start a family. Now, of course, I'm sure you can appreciate buying, heroin, crack, and cocaine, etc., is difficult for a mom. It's tough to relate to the other moms. So I transitioned out. I was in law school full-time while working full-time as a police officer. And fortunately, I was just at the point of being ready to graduate when we started our family. And so I transitioned into the prosecutor's office, and I spent some time there, which was remarkable as well, because all the same skills overlap, and they're really just people skills. So whether you're dealing with a drug dealer or the CEO of a company, it's really just people, and they all have the same challenges oftentimes when it comes to being able to read people, being able to show up in a way that's trustworthy and charismatic. And that is something that I really took a close look at. And then I went to graduate school, studied a little bit more. And now I am on the road, essentially sharing that information. I call it tactical influence with other people. And I'm having a great time because I get just as much back from the audiences afterward. When you step off the stage and you talk to people, I hear how they've implemented similar things or they've tried these techniques, and it's been a really, really amazing journey for me.
That is just fantastic. So inspirational for our listeners and viewers. So what current projects are you most excited about? In particular, your foray into TV, I'm curious about.
Yeah, I finished shooting a 10 episode series called Building Bad. So that should be hitting the airways in early 2025. And I've been approached to do another program with the same producer. So it's sort of a docu-series type idea where I give the, police officer / criminal lawyer overview of what's happening on screen. And it's been a lot of fun. It's really, really different to do that. So I'm enjoying that. And there's great projects. So And I'm very appreciative because we can shoot in between travel and those types of things. So it's been a lot of fun.
So it feels like it's not even work, I bet. It feels like a lot of fun and interesting to do this.
Yeah, it is really fun. The series was shot, the first series was shot in an old jail. So there are jail cells behind me, and it's a really interesting place. It's kind of this theme of the engineering behind crimes, essentially. So when criminals do things and they pull off these incredible stunts, or they're able to get to certain places you wouldn't think they could get to, what's the engineering behind that? So there's another host on there that will talk about the science behind it. So I'll talk about the crimes and the criminal background, and we have someone talking about the science and the engineering. So it's going to be, a really fun program that families can watch. It's not something that will scare people. It's just really, I found it fascinating. Some of the crimes they came up with were so bizarre.
Oh, what creativity. I can't wait. So we'll share it in the show notes. So which networks is it launching on in Canada and the US?
I think it's supposed to be on Crave, and Bell Media has some impact on it. So the team is going to be sending me the links, etc. So I'll make sure that I share whatever I get with you, and hopefully people will be able to tune in and give their feedback.
Fabulous. Can't wait to share that and can't wait to watch it myself in the new year, Pamela.
Thank you.
So can I get your autograph, by the way? What achievement or moment in your career, because you've had a prolifically interesting and impactful career, what moment or achievement are you most proud of?
Oh, I think, it's really been going from 0 to 60, essentially, in speaking. It's been a learning curve that's quite challenging at times, for sure. But I think the skill set that I brought from being a prosecutor, being able to stand up in front of the judge or juries and present, that really increased my learning curve around that, because I practiced and I wanted to be able to deliver impactful statements in my opening, closing, of course, and with cross-examination or examination in chief of witnesses. And that really came into speaking. And the part I love, though, about what I do now is that I can have some fun with it, because as you can appreciate, you can't be making jokes or having funny stories in the middle of a trial. So I've been able to take some of the things, the crazy things that happened to me over those 20 years, and put them and sprinkle them into the content of the talks that I give, so that people have an understanding. And they've heard leadership talks from incredible people, and communication talks and talks on trust, and those are all things I touch on. But I'm really proud that I can bring a background that most people don't have access to help really instill that messaging and drive home some points in an informative but entertaining way.
Absolutely. And you do so well at that. You're such an inspiration to me, being a couple years behind you in terms of the keynote speaking career. And it's a real marathon to build it up. But I really admire how you've built that up, and you're speaking all over the place, mainly in the US, right?
That's primarily my marketplace, and it's been wonderful. I love it because even though, in North America, there's so many similarities between Canadians and Americans, there's a lot of overlap. But even within Canada, if I speak in Toronto, it's a very different vibe from Halifax or Vancouver or Montreal. And the same when I go into the States, if I speak in California versus Florida or Texas or Ohio, it's really fascinating to me. So I learn each time, and I'm fortunate that I've been able to meet a lot of people and explore the US a lot more than I did before this career. I rarely traveled before because I was always working, as most people are.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's talk about trust, because I feel my research is on toxic leadership and toxic workplaces, and I feel like a lack of trust is preeminent in a lot of workplaces, unfortunately. So why is it trust itself a superpower in today's organizations?
Well, people are much more likely to follow people and really buy into whatever that change or messaging is. We know that change happens literally overnight now, and it can be really difficult, and it does brew up some toxicity when people feel insecure or that they're not really sure what's going to be happening next. But if they really trust their colleagues and their leadership, they will follow because they know they're not going to get steered wrong. And if something does go wrong, and things always do, that they trust the person that or leadership team that's leading them to know what to do in the moment. So for me, and the research that I've done and the things that I've seen, trust really exists at the crossroads of confidence and empathy, or strength and warmth, because too much of one, not enough of the other, is really challenging for people. So if we can have that balance in our leaders, and from that balance comes charisma. People who are charismatic really get a lot of buy-in, which is why, if it's just all charisma without the trust, that's how con people are able to get buy-in from people, because we'll find that the biggest cons that we've ever heard about, the Bernie Madoffs and the Wolf on Wall Street, et cetera, they are so charismatic that they can get people to buy into anything. But we need to have trust as the foundation for the charisma, and those things that really help to build and instill trust for people to win and have success in whatever it is that they're going to be doing.
Really well put. I love that combination of strength or courage, I would call it, and warmth or care. Care for the human being, but also being strong. I think too much we see one side of that or the other. You're totally right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, there are different people socialized in certain ways. So we've all worked with someone who's so empathetic, so warm, that they're almost like a walking Hallmark movie. And that doesn't instill trust, because we wonder if they can really have what it takes to win and to bring us with them. And then we've also, probably more often, especially in the toxic workplaces, is we have someone who's incredibly confident, so much so that it comes off as arrogance or dismissive. And that doesn't instill trust, because we think, if they don't care about me, if they don't have any concern about the company as a whole or the project as a whole, and it's all about them, we don't trust them. So we need to have that balance.
Exactly. And we need to know they have the strength to have our back and stand up for us, right? And if they're too soft, they don't.
Exactly.
So, how can leaders instill a culture of trust and create a trusting environment in workplaces and organizations?
Well, there's many things that they're probably already doing, but there's a few that sometimes stand out. And one is transparency. And transparency is a challenge. We want to be transparent, but sometimes there are things that the C-suite is telling the leadership team that can't be shared with everyone yet, or isn't really worked out all the way. So being transparent can be challenging, but I encourage people to be as transparent as possible with the information that they're permitted to share, and share it in a way that lands with people so that they understand. They know what's going to be happening. They know what the end goal is, and they have some steps to get there. So that transparency, and also that ownership and transparency of when mistakes are made. If a leader screws something up, as will happen, anyone who's in action is going to screw things up. It's just a part of how the world works. To take ownership for that, to really take responsibility, and not to downplay it or to offload it onto somebody else. That is a trust killer. If we do those types of things, we really need to own it. And people forget about it a lot sooner. Think about politicians, for example, that they get caught doing something and they try to pretend either it wasn't them, or that it didn't happen, or it's less than, or it's somebody else's fault, and it just makes it worse, as opposed to saying, you know what, yeah, I'm a human being and I totally screwed that up, but I promise you it won't happen again. I learned from that mistake.
I was just going to say, what did I learn from it? I'm sorry. And here's what I'm going to do differently, right?
Exactly.
Easier said than done for some of them, but that's the recipe, isn't it?
And it is for all of us. It's embarrassing to admit mistakes, or that we don't know everything, or that we've, taken people down the wrong path, and it's either cost them time or money or relationships, whatever that is. To come back and say, exactly what you said, I screwed up, I own it, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to do things differently now. And that gets a lot more buy-in and trust. And it's really all around emotional intelligence. That's really what building trust is, both in a corporate culture and as individuals, because it all starts with us. Trust starts with us. It doesn't exist in this ether. It really has to be internal, and then it becomes a part of the culture.
And I would say it's head, it's your brain, but it's also your heart, right? So it's both. It's being heart and brain centered. Would you agree?
Oh, I would agree, absolutely. And oftentimes for women, especially women in my era, the Gen X era essentially, is that we were told, you have to be strong, you have to be tough, you have to. And worked in very, very masculine organizations. I was the only woman in a unit of 92 specialized undercover drug officers. And it was, you really start to believe that maybe I need to be tougher, maybe I need to act like this and do this. But I can tell you from an undercover standpoint, when you try, and this translates to everything from the boardroom to HR, et cetera, if we're trying to take on a personality or traits that are not actually authentic to who we are, that comes across terribly and really is destructive to trust. If we don't embrace our own personality and then just add a couple extra layers of, confidence or strength and maybe temper it with some warmth and empathy, that's where the magic happens. We're just taking who we are and charging it up a little bit with those types of things and being more aware. So if you're someone who people tell you you're very intimidating, that is often a sign that you're not showing the warmth or empathy that probably exists, but maybe you're tamping it down because you think that that's how you're supposed to be, or that's really not part of your core and it's something that you want to work on. Fortunately, you can. These are not things we're just born and die with. These are things we develop over time. Or if you're someone that people feel they can talk to all the time, they come to you with all their problems, yet you are never selected for the big projects or the leadership roles, then you're probably incredibly empathetic. You're showing a lot of warmth, but you're not taking in more confidence and demonstrating more confidence and strength. So that's something. So just think about what people tell you about yourself. Are you either intimidating or you're the person they want to talk to, or you seem very confident all the time. They're telling you how you're showing up, and it may not be how you think you're showing up. So really try to instill a little bit of the other side, the yin yang, the warmth and strength, and try to just balance it a little bit. And there are easy techniques to do that.
Fantastic. I just love the way you explained things. So, Pamela, give us a sense of what nonverbals would tell you that a leader or someone is not trustworthy or they're lying. Give us some nuggets.
Well, I wish we could be this human lie detector, but we can't. There's really no one thing that every person would do that you could say they're lying or they're not trustworthy. So you need to have a baseline for that person. How do they act and respond to things normally, both when things are going well and when things are very stressful? That will tell you a lot about who they are because you're looking for deviations from that baseline. And if it's someone you've just met, I encourage people to have conversations for at least 5 or more minutes about something that has nothing to do with the negotiation or nothing to do with the job description that they're talking about or the project, whatever it is, so that you can see how they are in that normal work relationship. And then if you have questions or concerns about something, perhaps they've said that they're promising you a certain timeline or they're promising a deliverable at a certain cost point, at a price point, and you suspect that that's not really accurate. There's a few things that can help you become better at determining that. So one is when we see people with a verbal nonverbal disconnect. So they are saying yes to you, but they maybe shrugged a little bit no, they're turning their head no, or they are becoming a little bit more closed off and defensive toward you. They back away, creating space. They cross off their body language, showing a bit of insecurity or a bit of a challenge. Doesn't necessarily mean they're lying, but it means that you have triggered something that you want to find out a little bit more about. So we're looking for your stimulus, which would be your question, your statement to them, whatever it is that you want to find out about. You can show them a document, a photograph, you ask a question, you have a conversation, and how they respond within the first 5 seconds is what you want to pay a lot of attention to. Or let's say you've asked them something to confirm, and instead of answering your question, they repeat the question back to you, so they're buying time. Unless it's a really complicated question they don't understand, then give them some grace. But if it's a very simple question that you asked, will this be available Tuesday? Will it be available Tuesday? If they speak the same language as you and they're asking you a question that is very simplistic, they're just buying time. Or if they say something along the lines of, oh, well, that's a very good question. Again, buying time. Well, of course it's a good question. That's why you asked it. So for them to put that out there, they're probably buying some time. And we see that in interviews all the time. You watch people on the news or you watch perhaps in podcasts, et cetera. People start repeating questions back. Sometimes they are trying to just filter out information that makes the most sense. But oftentimes that can be a demonstration of not being prepared. So they aren't able to answer that question because they don't have the knowledge base or the competence to do it, or they're trying to steer you in a different direction.
Okay, interesting. So that is a good nugget to look out for. Um, I know you speak a lot around this topic of trust, but I'm curious what topics in general you're doing most of lately that are needed by organizations and workplaces. Like, what are you talking about to audiences?
Well, I've found, especially, and I was told recently by a bureau partner, with the transition of government happening in our biggest partner in the United States, we're seeing a lot more requests. Obviously, leadership talks are very, very important. But for me, my sweet spot has been tactical influence. So how do we influence people from a position of trust, obviously, because I lied about who I was and what I did for over a decade. So deception for many people is something that they can do. And for me, that was a part of my job because it'd be tough to buy cocaine if I said, hey, I'm an undercover drug cop. So there was, that layer that went over top of that. But then also when I started prosecuting and having people on the stand and interviewing witnesses, I was always trying to get to the truth. I wasn't trying to catch people in a lie. I was trying to get to the truth. And that's really, I think, where a lot of corporations and leadership are now. They want to know what the truth is. They want to understand what their customers and clients are looking for. They want to know how to communicate with them from a position of influence, because they want to have certain outcomes. And it's not for nefarious purposes. Clearly, all of the things I teach and talk about could be used in a wrong way, just like anything. There are going to be great people that take that information and make it even greater and use it to better their company, better themselves, better their customers, or there are people who can use those things to influence and manipulate people into doing things they don't necessarily want to or that are not right for them. So I think having the agenda filter built into that, something I talk about, agenda filters into this tactical influence, you have to filter out why you're doing what you're doing. And if it's for betterment, go for it. If it's a negative, then you really need to stop and take a look at what it is you're doing, why you're doing that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think if we try to cloak our true reasons with stories that aren't fully true, people can see through it, can't they?
Every time when you've walked away from someone, you're like, I liked what they said, but there was just something felt off. Or if you've even gone to buy something, maybe a big ticket purchase of a house or a car or jewelry or something along those lines. And you walk away from that salesperson thinking, there's just something I didn't like about them. They seem to have all the answers, but it just didn't feel right. And there's a reason. Your intuition is very accurate. I encourage people, listen to that, because they either said something briefly, had a micro expression, or even a larger gesture that signaled to you what they were saying was not accurate, not trustworthy.
Mm-hmm. And eye contact, I imagine when you look into someone's eyes and they have, good eye contact versus, I call them, crazy eyes, or like they're darting around or whatever. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you look out with that?
Absolutely. And again, this is very culturally sensitive because there are some cultures where eye contact, depending on generations or even genders, can be viewed as disrespectful or as something that is too aggressive. So understanding the cultural background of the people or the person that you're dealing with is primary, because eye contact, when we talk about it from a North American or Western European type standpoint, we like eye contact. Not too much because, as you mentioned, that's bordering on restraining order. Not too little because it seems disinterested or deceptive. So 60 to 70% in our culture is deemed as more trustworthy, more engaged. And we can do that, especially people who are a bit more introverted or a bit more shy. Just registering the eye color of the person you're speaking with will send a message to them. You've looked them into the eye briefly, you've registered, they know you've seen them, they see you, and that builds a connection. So contrary to what most people think, eye contact, looking away or looking up to the left or down to the right or whatever it is, has absolutely nothing to do with an individual's. You can't say that they're recalling something from the future or something from the past or forecasting something in the future or being deceptive. That is a myth. So the person you're speaking with, that's why that baseline is so important. Are they always looking away from you? Are they always down, have their eyes down? Then if they do that when they're speaking to you, you have to treat it as a neutral. Or are they always making piercing eye contact with you? Maybe that's just who they are. We all have those people who are close talkers or they stare. And oftentimes they don't even realize they're doing it.
Interesting. I love the concept of baseline. It's changes from baseline that you're looking for. And just being more intentionally aware of how people communicate on any given day to get your baseline.
Exactly. And we model the behavior that we're looking for. I'm sure you've had a lot of research and many guests talk about, we get what we tolerate. We receive back what we put out there as being tolerable to us. And if we are acting in a way that always seems to be rushed and disengaged. We have our cell phone out during a meeting, even if it's face down. That's telegraphing to someone that they're not as important, that meeting is not as important. There are all sorts of nonverbal cues that we can send. I encourage people when they walk into a meeting, have their cell phone visible. So you have your cell phone out, and you make sure that someone sees you, the person that you want to connect with and influence. They see you, put it away in your bag, put it away in your blazer pocket, put it out of sight, out of mind. And that telegraphs, this meeting is important to me. All of my attention is right here, right now. Now, of course, there are exceptions. If you have a sick child or you're waiting for numbers to show up from your sales team and you need to have them right there. But I encourage people to verbalize that. I apologize for the phone. My son went to school not feeling great, and they promised that they would call if there was a challenge or something along those lines. So if you put it out there, then people will ignore it. But if you just walk in and have your phone sitting there, even if they do, it's transmitting something. You don't wait to see what they're doing for you to be the one that takes the first steps in establishing that trust, that confidence and empathy. Putting your phone away, sitting up with great posture, making eye contact, keeping your chin level with the ground or the desk, not having it up, not having it down. It's just great posture. Those translate to confidence and warmth because I'm open, I'm interested, and I'm present. That says a lot to someone.
What about smiling?
Yeah, again, it has to be in the moment. Smiling is great. I think smiling, especially at least having a neutral face. We all have RBF, right? That resting bitter face or bored face, whatever you want to call the B. And it's called gravity. That's what I call it. We all have it. It's just, that's our resting face. And if you have an RBF, if people are asking, are you okay? How's your day? Does something happen? If they're asking you that when you're feeling in a great mood, that means your RBF is on display and you're shining a bright light on it. So I encourage people when they're doing video calls, etc., just record it. And I know it's painful. I don't like listening to myself. I don't like watching myself. It is painful for everybody. But you can just see where your neutral face is. And I encourage people, if it's appropriate, try to have at least a neutral smile or neutral face. The fake smile, everybody knows what that is. It's like when you get on to United or Air Canada and they tell you they're happy to see you and they have that smile. We know they're not happy to see us. It's telegraphed right across their face. And people respond even more negatively to a fake smile than they do to RBF.
Okay. Well, Interesting. So, my final two questions that I ask all guests in our last minute or so here. I want to ask Pamela what you read and listen to for your own growth and development.
I try to follow recommendations because on Audible, or if you download Kindle books, etc., or they'll send you recommendations based on the last things that you have listened to. So I am reading a book now called Insight, and it's phenomenal. Of course, I revisit Dr. Robert Cialdini's influence frequently because he is really the grandfather of a lot of the research that we talk about. I enjoy watching people's courses. I subscribe to Masterclass, so I will watch something from Colonel Hatfield on space, even though I have zero knowledge around that topic. I find it fascinating. There'd be gardening shows, all of the things. I don't try to just stay in my lane. Of course, I stay updated. I subscribe to several journals and get the most recent studies. But I like the fun stuff too, because I think any place that people interact and engage and I can watch them and listen to them, they're on Masterclass for a reason. They're exceptional at what they do. So I want to model their behaviors. What are the things that really engage me? And that's what I encourage other people to do. Just watch and listen, and of course, read, and you'll start to model those things and really take it in.
And the diversity of what you're learning from masterclass, etc., that must come in handy when you're speaking to different audiences in different industries, Pamela.
Oh, absolutely. I customize every single talk. I've never delivered the same talk twice. I think because I would be bored if I did that. And there are some speakers who are exceptional at that. They have their timing and everything perfect. They can tell a joke they've told a million times and it sounds like it's the first time anyone's ever heard it. And that is a brilliance that I don't necessarily have. I need to be interested myself to make it interesting. So that's exactly right. If I'm speaking to pharmaceutical or healthcare types of audiences, I will listen to some of their podcasts or I will watch some of the leaders in that industry so that I can pick up on some of the language and the pacing and timing of what they like and how they learn. Because as you know, if I'm in a room full of salespeople versus a room full of engineers, for example, they have very different reactions and very different ways of taking in information often. Not always, but I would say generally that's the case. The salespeople, they're extroverted. Maybe they've been at the hotel bar till 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know. The engineers, they want the data. They want it presented in a way that is logical. So that's why I like to change things up and really get engaged with each audience.
Fantastic. So, my final question, Pamela, is if you could have one wish for a better world when it comes to trust, what would it be?
Demonstrate. It starts with us. So don't wait for other people to take that lead. Don't count on government leadership or movie stars or anyone else that you think has all the answers. It really starts internally, and that will spread. Imagine if we all did a few more things to demonstrate a bit more transparency, authenticity, respect. That is a huge component of trust. Imagine if you just put doing the simple things. I once heard, I was watching, I think it was a master class, and I love to give credit, but I can't remember who said it. They said, if you can't do the little things, those little things like putting the grocery cart back or being on time for a meeting or even a little bit early, if you can't master those little things that really require zero skill, you will not be able to convince people that you have a grasp and control over the big things. So really taking those little things to heart and trying to be excellent, or at least the best you can be at everything you're undertaking.
That is so beautifully put. Thank you so much. I've learned so much from this conversation. I just appreciate that we've met and that we're able to share these messages on this podcast with as many people in the US and Canada and my other global audiences as possible.
Well, thank you, Dr. Laura, and I appreciate you taking the time to put these incredible programs together for people because isn't that amazing? Podcast free. People get free information as often as they want. It's remarkable. So thank you for doing that.
You are so welcome, and I really wish you all the best with your continued speaking and, television series work. I think it's extraordinary, Pamela.
Thank you.
Stay well. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Where Work Meets Life. If you found this content valuable, please rate and review the episode and share with others who may benefit. Visit me on my website at drlaura.live and sign up for my monthly e-newsletter full of tips and resources. I'm also a passionate keynote speaker and would be delighted to speak with you on your speaking needs. Stay well.